This is the portable power station that kept my 12-volt fridge cold through a windy night and still had the nerve to jumpstart my neighbor's stubborn SUV the next morning. That mix of camping power and roadside backup turned out to be the real reason I reached for it all weekend. The VTOMAN Jump 600X sits in that hybrid category I rarely see done well. It's a compact battery power station with a built-in port for car jumpstarting. If you spend time car camping, running a CPAP off-grid, or you just want a single box that can charge your gear and bail out a dead starter battery, this is aimed squarely at you. It's not the fastest charging station on my shelf, and it's not the lightest, but it balances capability with a safety-forward battery chemistry that makes it easy to store and forget until you actually need it. The design is unapologetically tool-like: matte black skin, high-contrast yellow accents, and a shape that sits steady on gravel. The fixed handle won me over quicker than I expected. No wobble, no flex, and it's strong enough that I didn't think twice carrying it with one hand along with a cooler in the other. It's around 14 pounds, so not featherweight, but once it's down, it stays where you put it. The vents live on the sides, which matters because you can't toss it on its back or side while it's running without blocking airflow. The front face lays things out in a way that makes sense in the dark. A readable display in the center, clusters of AC, DC, and USB ports, each with their own on-off button, and a surprisingly useful LED floodlight that's bright enough to set up a tent or fish for a cable under a seat. The screen is fine indoors and in the car. Under direct sun, I had to shade it with my hand to see wattage and remaining percentage. That's a minor annoyance, but I noticed it every time I tried to check on it at midday. Getting started was simple. Mine arrived with a partial charge. I topped it up with the included wall charger before testing, which I recommend because it seems to help the battery gauge calibrate. There's no app, which I actually appreciated here. No pairing, no firmware anxiety, just hardware buttons that do what they say. Each output group has its own power button. That cuts accidental drain when you only want, say, the DC ports on for a fridge. The LED light cycles through several brightness levels, plus strobe and SOS. I used the middle setting the most while I was sorting gear at dusk. Pass-through charging works, so you can have it plugged into the wall or the car while powering smaller devices. It's not an automatic UPS though. If your home loses power, it doesn't switch over on its own the way a dedicated UPS does. So I wouldn't use it to protect a desktop or a server. What changes the daily experience more than anything is the battery chemistry and the way the DC outputs are regulated. This uses LiFePO4 cells, which I trust more for storage in a garage or trunk than older chemistries. Cycle life is measured in years, not months, and that alone makes it feel like a long-term tool rather than a consumable gadget. On the DC side, the 12-volt car socket and the two barrel ports are regulated at 12 volts. That sounds nerdy, but here's why it matters. A lot of 12-volt fridges and CPAPs get finicky and shut off early if voltage sags as the battery drains. With this, they stayed steady, right down to the last stretch. On AC power, it's a pure sine output that ran both my laptop brick and camera chargers without electrical noise. The rating sits at 600 watts continuous, with short peaks up to 1200. I pushed it with a small space heater labeled for 700 watts, using VTOMAN's constant power trick. It kept running by lowering voltage instead of just shutting off, which meant the heater stayed on at reduced heat instead of tripping the station. That's not how I want to run a heater every day, but as a winter camping or emergency bathroom warming stopgap, it's a helpful safety valve. Charging speed is where the compromise shows. The wall charger fed it at roughly 100 watts, and going from about 20% to full took me a little over 5 hours. From near empty, it's an afternoon. In an extended outage, you'll feel that. On solar, I tested with a 100-watt folding panel. Under clear noon sun, I saw between mid-80s and low 90s watts most of the time, which is about as good as it gets for a panel that size. You're limited to lower voltage portable panels, so don't expect to plug in a big residential panel directly. Car charging works as expected on a road trip. I topped it up while driving and kept a fridge running in the back without drama. One limitation that caught me once: you can't charge it through the USB-C port. If you misplace the barrel charger, your options narrow quickly. Let me walk through what happened when I lived with this for a few days. On a Friday night car camp, I ran a 12-volt compressor fridge set to 36 degrees Fahrenheit and a couple of LED camp lights. The fridge isn't constantly pulling, but on a warm evening it averaged around the 40 to 50 watt range while cycling. I got a solid overnight run from dinner until breakfast, and I still had leftover capacity to boil water with a small 300 watt kettle after sunrise. The regulated DC meant no low voltage error or early cutoff from the fridge, which I've seen happen with unregulated power stations once they dip below 50%. The fan kicked on a few times during heavier AC use. It's noticeable, like a gaming laptop on medium load. In a silent tent, I wouldn't sleep with it right next to my head. A couple of feet away or in the car, it fades into the background. Back at home, I set up on the patio to work. I plugged a MacBook into the 60-watt USB-C port, added a small USB desk fan, and let the AC outlets rest. The USB-C stayed stable, kept the laptop charging while I edited, and freed up the AC plugs for other gear. That's how I prefer to use these stations. DC where possible, AC only when I need it. Efficiency is better, and the fans kick in less often. I also tested it during an evening outage simulation. Router, modem, a desk lamp, and my phone charging off USB. On DC and USB alone, I got a few hours of normal life without burning through the battery. When I flipped the AC on and added a bigger lamp, I noticed heat building at the vents, and the fan spooled up. Not alarming, but it reminded me to keep those vents clear and the station upright on a hard surface, not sunk into a blanket. The jump start feature is why I kept it in the trunk for a week. The cables don't come in the box, which annoyed me given the product name, so I grabbed the jumper cable accessory separately. I used it on a mid-size SUV with a weak battery after a day of dome lights being left on. Clip on, confirm the indicator, and crank. It fired immediately. That's the moment this product differentiates itself. One box covers your campsite and your roadside. It's not a tiny pocket jump pack, but it's the one I'd rather have mid-trip. I also tried a CPAP overnight at home with the DC adapter, humidifier off. That comfortable 8 hours landed me the next morning with charge left. With the humidifier on, expect a big hit to runtime, but it's still a practical single-night safety net. If you need multiple nights, the expansion port for an external battery makes more sense than lugging a second station. There are a few touches I ended up using more than I expected. The LED floodlight isn't a throwaway. It spreads light in a way that made plugging in cables at night painless. The dedicated power buttons for each output group save wasted energy. Pass-through charging meant I could treat it as a power strip in the garage while it topped itself off. And the expandable battery port is there if your use grows. Starting at around 300 watt-hours and stepping up later is a nice path, instead of rebuying a larger unit. It's not perfect. The wall charging is slow by today's standards. Faster input would make this much more confident during multi-day storms. Fan noise is noticeable when you're pulling real power or charging. If your plan is to run it in a small bedroom overnight, place it a few feet away and expect a bit of whoosh. The screen can be hard to read in bright sun. The handle doesn't fold, which costs you some stacking efficiency in a packed trunk. The inability to charge via USB-C is a miss for me when traveling light. And the solar input voltage limit locks you into portable panels rather than letting you repurpose higher voltage home panels. And while it supports pass-through, it shouldn't be treated as a true UPS for sensitive computers. Still, when I look at the whole picture, I trust it. The LiFePO4 battery chemistry, the regulated 12V ports, and that jumpstart port make it feel like an automotive-grade tool rather than a gadget. It's the station I'd loan to a friend who's doing a national park loop in an older SUV and wants a single box that does a little bit of everything reliably. If you're a car camper running a fridge, a CPAP user who needs dependable 12V power, a remote worker who prefers USB-C charging, or a driver who wants an emergency plan beyond jumper cables that depend on a second car, this checks the right boxes. If your priority is ultra-fast charging, absolute silence, or tying into a high-voltage solar array, you'll be happier with a different style of station. I'll keep using this for road trips and backyard work sessions. It's not flashy, but it consistently did the two things I actually needed: power camp gear without voltage drama and start an engine when it mattered. That combination is rare, and it's what earns it a permanent spot in my trunk. You can find detailed information about the VTOMAN Jump 600X portable power station in the comments section.